When I was at university, I aced my paper on queer theory, which means, obviously, I am now an expert in all things gender related. Actually, I probably am inadvertently, literally, and ironically more qualified to talk about this than the vast majority of the shit that I usually come out with. Sitting in a darkened screening room, the lecturer asked everyone to raise their hand. Who did the Bollywood essay? Who did French New Wave? Who did queer theory? And here's my dumbass with his hand in the air. I was the only one. Cough, cough. Really, guys? I've just been outed, or so it would appear, although I'm not gay, says the guy who found himself standing in front of the class the other week, arguing the merits of Brokeback Mountain, explaining in specific detail why people should watch it. Honestly, guys, I'm not gay. Not that I said that in front of the class, although the quivering dude in my group kind of awkwardly did. But Ang Lee is a truly astonishing director, and in the same way as I would stand up in front of my peers and make that same argument, I genuinely don't give a fuck if you think I am gay. I would also tell you that I'm gender non-conformist, but you'd probably think I was just taking the piss. But I'm explaining this to you, not as someone squirming away from your negative opinions. I'm explaining it because throughout history it's been seen as a bad thing to be gay, even an illegal thing. And I'm standing up here saying, if you've got an issue, I don't. Being fully aware that it's not a justification that need be made, but I'm making a deliberate point of it because for society at large, especially the one I grew up in, it was indeed a big fucking issue. And it shouldn't be, as far as I'm concerned. But as we've already established, nobody gives a fuck what I have to say. It's fascinating how deeply homophobia is ingrained in our culture. In terms of etymology, there are question marks over the word bad. One potential origin is the word badal, which in ye olde English translates as hermaphrodite or a womanish man. And I would argue that there is nothing which connotates negativity in our society more than that one simple little word, bad. And if it's fundamental to our everyday language, it begs the question, how deeply has society implanted this notion in our psyches? Before we begin to ponder the ramifications, from the Freakonomics perspective, my first question was why? What utility is there in this? And in the past, I might have looked at it from the perspective of the victim. It's to create the other, a way of ostracizing those who don't conform, to strengthen your social status. But what is the overall effect of creating a rigid ideal of masculinity? What utility is there in using the influence of gender roles within society to encourage men to suppress their emotions? And perhaps it is merely a crude strategy to keep them from expressing aggression. And speaking from personal experience, when you suppress your emotions, it can potentially lead to any number of psychological issues, and in some cases it genuinely leads to the worst of tragedies. And it seems to me this kind of crude strategy is somewhat outmoded, like the kind of thing a child might use as a psychological defense mechanism, which it may perhaps spend a lifetime trying to sort out in therapy. I think it's time for a more nuanced approach. I think it's time for mankind to learn how to express their emotions without waiting for the spree killer to show up at their local high school. When you try to suppress an energy, when there is no outlet, the pressure builds. You're actively generating the extremes. That's the problem. I don't know if anybody else is seeing it, and I don't know exactly what we should do about it, but I think talking is a good start. But gender these days has become such a fucking minefield and an extremely contentious issue. I recently saw a video by Slavoj Žižek, a Slovenian philosopher, on the topic of gender. He explained that he'd created one of these online teacup storms because he said that our gender, our sexuality, was an integral part of our being, something which we can only really discover the truth of. It's not something we get to choose. My apologies to the beautifully humoured Slavoj Žižek and his followers for the weak paraphrasing, but it's been a while since I watched the video. But in general, he took issue with the idea that it was some kind of game, where one could fluctuate at will. And there are elements of his argument that I sincerely agree with. The fact that a human being would cut off their own genitals says it all. At the extreme, it could hardly be more extreme. But I think there are also those for whom being right in the middle is a reality. And here's my argument. We're talking about the fluctuation between two binary poles, masculine, feminine, never more perfectly captured than in the yin-yang symbol, because everything works in cycles, loops around and feeds back into itself. Day turns from night into day. The moon pulls the tide in and out. Your heartbeat follows the same pattern, pumps out the blood, refills, goes again. The same patterns are all around you. Everything rises and falls. Chaos contains the seed of order, order the seed of chaos. Why should gender itself be different? So, in a sense, there would be four genders. It would be male and female, with a feminine male or masculine female, depending on which direction you flow. On a yin-yang symbol, the feminine male is represented by the black dot, and the masculine female is the white one. The nature of your internal being may not match your physical gender, so drag queens would be feminine male, and trans male to female would actually be female. And it may be that you're somebody who feels very strongly that you are a certain way. It may be that you fluctuate over a long period, or that the way you feel fluctuates more frequently. We all have masculine and feminine traits which can fluctuate, and however a person chooses to express their gender identity, they should be respected, unless they are, of course, a chomo. But when it comes to kids, that's where it gets extremely problematic. I personally wouldn't trust my teenage self with the controls to the TV, expecting preteens to make massive life-altering decisions like that, hormones, etc., looking at it as impartially as I can. After having watched more than my fair share of reality television shows, I can quite honestly say I still genuinely don't have the first fucking clue. Because some people couldn't have been happier that they were taken seriously and were allowed to transition from a young age, and there are those who regret all of it. What shudders my timbers are the people who use those who have had regrets after transitioning for their anti-trans agenda. And then there are super progressives raising babies, gender non-binary babies. It's the same don't fuck with sparrows argument. It's not that we don't already fuck with people's heads by enforcing gender stereotypes, but by making sweeping alterations to the systems which we have grown organically over generations, it can have unforeseen traumatic effects. For me, the line should be when a person voluntarily chooses to make alterations in their own life and are of a mature enough age to make those decisions. But then, where do we draw the line? What age? I'm honestly trying to keep an open mind. I just want whatever works out the best for everybody, and each individual case is different. But hey, it's not up to me. And we all sit around gabbing like it was when we should instead be worrying about the next pandemic, asteroid strike, or ecological disaster. But why? Why was I the only person doing the queer theory essay? What's going on with me? Perhaps that's best exemplified by a phone call I made around November last year. And here's me publishing books with descriptors about my years working on suicide hotlines. Super together, a safe pair of hands, when in reality, here's me now on the other end of the phone as the caller, drinking for the first time in a long time. I knew the service, I knew the questions they would ask, but what would I talk about? Why was I calling? And guys, if you've been reading these books, you know I could have led with virtually anything. Would it be autism, social anxiety, catastrophizing, narcissism, suicidal ideation, existential crisis, general ostracism, prolonged psychotic episodes, or basically just take your pick of individual neuroticisms? But instead, I chose to lead with gender dysphoria, and I told them about a time when I was younger that I'd received compliments from numerous people on my long and girlish lashes. So I went home and cut them off. I just wanted to see what they made of it. It was my way of saying, hey, you're talking to a freak here. I was the kid throwing a tantrum to see if I would still be accepted. And the dude on the phone had a Pakistani accent, an older man. There's every chance he was a Muslim, and bless him, I could hear the cultural tension in him. I felt guilty for being as challenging as I was, for coming over like such a know-it-all. And there was only really one thing I needed to hear. I was fatigued. That's just where I was, trying too hard, wearing myself thin, with a really extreme and poorly thought out diet, I was physically and emotionally exhausted. But why was I so ashamed as a kid of my long, luscious lashes? They say that transgender people under brain scans seem to show the same patterns as those of the opposite gender, born into male bodies with female brains, for example. It felt like my entire existence I was trying to hide the truth of who I was, like I was really female, but I never had the inclination to dress up in women's clothes. My subterfuge was far deeper than that. I wanted to be hyper-masculine, devoted martial artist, athlete, perpetually engrossed in comic books and 90s action movies. But I've explained elsewhere the affinity which I felt for Vasquez and aliens. And let's face it was only ever the female side of my personality that ever had any impetus. And some chicks want to be a princess and others want to be a queen. But if it was my choice, I would go with goddess every fucking time. And I'm sitting here writing this in an army green vest. I am the stereotypical masculine female in a man's body, and I have a tendency to inadvertently piss off butch lesbians, despite the fact I consider myself to be one. And as far as the outside world is concerned, I'm just a guy, not a chick in a man's body pretending to be a guy. And thank fuck, let's be honest. I might have looked cute dolled up in girls' clothes when I was in my early 20s, but these days I'd be scaring your pets out of the fucking room. And God bless you if you are an ugly transsexual if you don't pass. There is no recourse for ugly people. Listen to Doug Stanhope. There ain't no union, there's no solidarity, no court of appeal when you are fucked over for a job, which goes to someone less qualified when they just happen to stroll into the room and be better looking than you. It's like brains, dog. How would you suggest they start differentiating motherfuckers? By their shoe size? I sometimes wonder if I have a similar pathology to Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. I'm a strange creature, of that you can be certain, with no cellar space of which I am aware. But how strange might I have been? I came across a site when I was around 17. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I didn't know whether I was coming or going, to be honest, but it was my first introduction to the rat trap, and down in the basement there were guys all around me in leather corsets and wedding dresses, and let's not forget, real honest-to-God super hot goth chicks in miniskirts, and I was like, what the fuck is going on in here? And this was in the days before Marilyn Manson, so none of it was mainstream. I didn't know what it was, but I liked it. And the very next day the club got shut down. I loved the grungy ground floor, the super heavy top floor with like only 6 people on it. This was my new home, and the very instant I was even aware of its existence, it was gone. A kid got stabbed to death apparently, and I don't really know the story, but I kind of had that effect on places. I kept walking into these spots, pubs, clubs, the black cat that crosses your path, and suddenly it all closes down. And you can rest assured that I was listening to the Crow soundtrack when it came time to edit this, my black nail-polished fingers gliding elegantly across the keys. But if I'd had a couple of years in that place, what might I have become? I never had the opportunity to become a proper goth. It got snatched away from me at the last. And these street goths I talk of in an ever-present threat, well, they were all over the place really. Grunge, new metal, whatever. As far as the general public were concerned, it was the new goth, but I came oh so very close to the real thing. People should be allowed to express themselves. They should be encouraged to, as long as they aren't harming others, with obvious exceptions such as cage fighters, BDSM, whatever you're into. Everyone is entitled to their opinions, just don't be an arsehole if that's still within your capabilities. People should be pulled up for their behaviour, but it's a question of minimal necessary force. People need correction. They don't need opposition, because that just makes shit worse. It seems like a complex answer, but it's simpler than the alternative. Masculine, female, it's just what I am. That's my truth. Whatever the fuck you want to do with it. Refute it, deny it, ignore it. But that's just who the fuck I am, and always have been. And I've always been a supermassive cock tease to gay guys because I'm just naturally this other thing which is sitting outside their reach. But there was this one kid in high school, damned if he wasn't insightful, as hate-filled as they come, of course, a blonde little overcompensating Gestapo-type little cunt who delighted in pointing out the way that I crossed my legs, my little mannerisms. But the bitch was right. I'm a freak, a woman's brain in a man's body. That's a fucking dangerous combination. Filled with drugs in my early 20s, there was no telling what the fuck was going to happen next. It's only really now in hindsight that I can figure out who I truly was through the entire of my childhood. Now I couldn't be more proud, more settled in my perspective. Whether you know where the fuck I'm coming from is irrelevant. I know where I'm at. I'm self-aware on a level that you don't even want to fuck with. And I'm somehow a complete fucking bimbo all at the same time. I'm not quite sure how I manage it. I'm still perpetually flummoxed, exasperated, never quite knowing how I make it from one moment to the next. I never truly know what the fuck it is I'm genuinely trying to say. And I just stopped in the middle of this chapter to watch a documentary about people living in the depths of the Siberian taiga. For fuck's sake. Huskies bleeding from the eyes because of mosquitoes. With all due respect to everyone in first world conditions, y'all don't know shit. And I'll put myself at the top of that list of the most useless motherfuckers, compared to the shit these guys have to contend with on a daily basis. The blanched brutality of Mother Nature. This is not to belittle all the people all over the world dealing with life-altering gender issues. The level of my gender issues run deeper than anything else in my life. It's the reason for me being the creature that I am today. But in this piece of work, I'm just comparing my own personal issues with someone who watched their dog get ripped apart by a bear. It's all relative, that's what I'm saying. It is something of a predisposition of an effete culture, but I love it, despite its self-indulgent excess. But it's now minus 50 degrees and the days are getting short. I don't feel the need to assert my identity because it is implicit in the nature of my being. You can gender me as you please. I've got other fucking things to worry about, like how cold my nips are. At this fucking temperature, we're all inadvertently at the risk of losing genitals. And I've just changed my desktop picture. If you want to look at it, the time is 1 hour, 7 minutes, 45 seconds. An astonishing shot in Werner Herzog's Happy People, A Year in the Taiga. Shot highly reminiscent of John Carpenter's The Thing. When it gets below a certain temperature, I don't think anybody really wants to hear about gender politics. When it's a matter of life and death, if it's warm, then I like it. But the picture that it replaced was the view from Cielo Drive in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Cliff Booth's view of the Hollywood Hills replaced by the biting tundra of Siberian wilderness. The sun and the snow kicking up fierce, almost blotting out the screen, but a group of heavily outfitted shadowy figures to the right of the picture, the vague outline of trees and buildings in the background. The two lifestyles couldn't be more beautifully juxtaposed. And it's just the same with people, really. You have to accept that there are different approaches to life, and everybody's just trying to get along as best they can, and it's all very confusing, and I get that. Trust me, I do. But some motherfuckers do have it better off than others, and it's not me gloating when I say I'm one of them. It's with humility and responsibility that I look upon the luxuries of the life that is afforded us by Western culture. I believe we should be more deeply appreciative of everything in life, and I try to daily remind myself of that by watching things like man's struggle in the blistering tundra, and I think perhaps somebody talking about gender issues makes them sound like a whinging brat. And that's either the cultural perception or my own neuroticism, but I usually just get the feeling that the rest of the world just wants you to shut the fuck up and let's go back to how things used to be, back when you were just a tomboy or what have you. People just don't want to hear it, and the depths of this conversation is just never going to be made explicit between me and my folks, because they struggle to cope with conversations about emotions on any level. But none of it makes any fucking difference because they love me for me, who I am, who I've always been. My gender is kind of just another entry on the laundry list of psychological abnormalities and repeated concussive brain traumas that I call a psyche. And that's my advice, is to look past the gender issues to who the person really is. If you look right into their soul, there's no need for words. It's all there, it's implicit. It's a conversation that I never need to have with anyone, ever, because the truth of it is embodied in me, this gender non-conforming lump. They have to fucking deal with it. It's their problem. So, anyway, that's how I ended up getting accidentally outed at film school. and I don't need anybody fucking around with my pronouns, and I sure as fuck wouldn't demand that somebody call me by my chosen pronoun either, as I reserve the right to call you a cunt-faced chomo motherfucker. Let's all just stick to first names and keep it simple. People have got global fucking pandemics to worry about, and I half expect one of my more clued up associates who does the whole social media shtick to say, dude, are you still banging on about gender politics? That shit is so last decade. Like the zeitgeist has rolled over this entire debate. COVID-19 flattened the landscape. Now the fixation is on Neolithic cave paintings or vajazzles or what have you. What comes next, I wonder? How best to decorate your fallout shelter? Tips for making the most out of your cyber mistress? Second-hand hoverboards and intravenous multicolored designer drugs straight from your dealer to your photocopier. And yeah, I've been up all night writing this nonsense, and it's coming up about 9:15, and I just went out for a classic writerly walk. See, the problem with all this quarantine is that motherfuckers feel the need to catch up on their DIY. I've got neighbours offering to jump into B&Q for me, which would be great and all if I knew which end of the hammer I was supposed to be screwing the thing with. But all around me there's the noise of electric drills all fucking afternoon, when all true quarantiners know it's bedtime. So in turn, I'm up playing Pantera all hours of the goddamn night, doing it properly, but not really that loud because I'm not that much of a dick, unlike these drill heads. It honestly sounds like there's someone in my hall gunning a chainsaw right now. They're coming at me through the fucking walls. Wait, but seriously, what kind of a fucking sex swing is this anyway? So I went for a walk in the park, listening to Evanescence, up through the forests, catching the bluebirds of the early morn, the trees alive with the sound of woodpeckers echoing back and forth either side of me, and I take a turn down a back road to avoid a woman walking her dogs, and I stop to soak in the scene, and some shambling miscreant happens past, and I say it out loud to myself once he's out of earshot. He may not be a pedo, but he certainly runs like one. Then turn to walk up a winding concourse deeper into the forest, and directly in my path is a broken tree, quite spectacularly so. A truly cataclysmic event had evidently taken place, and the broken branch was still attached to the tree, some 30 feet up in the air. So big, in fact, that I eventually decided to skirt around it in case my dumbass got squished. But as I approach it, up jumps a squirrel. He's looking at me like I was the one who had been looking at him this whole fucking time, right on the big ass broken branch. I don't want to freak the wee guy out, but I ain't going nowhere because I gotta fucking see this. So we're stood there just staring at each other till he sees some little twitch, like he thought I was going to draw on him. And up he shoots, the little varmint, right up into the devastating crack of the cataclysmically broken tree, being my point of perspective, exploring all the nooks and crannies, which I would, if I could. And on the walk back, I'm especially caught when the crescendo of the song I'm listening to is symphonied by a pair of twin magpies wheeling gracefully around the side of a building in tight formation. And I'm struck with the notion. We are all creatures of the forest. That's what we were. That's what we came out of. We emerged from the forest covered in the skins of dead animals. That's some fucking boss shit. Forgetting that's where we come from does us absolutely no favours whatsoever. But I'm beseeching you, if you can figure out my identity, can you please explain it to the fucking job centre? My passport is out of date. I don't drive a car. I don't even have a fucking mobile phone. I'm not prepared to exist in this world, but out of the forest I came, with renewed self-motivation. Maybe the world is on hiatus, but I'll be the one to get us back on track. As Vaughan Williams' Fantasia on a theme by Thomas Tallis plays gloriously in the background. That's right. It's a new beginning for mankind, and it all started here, with a squirrel in a broken tree. Was it a boy squirrel or a girl squirrel? I never did think to ask.